Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to be just starting in a minute or so. We'll just give time for other participants to dial in. Okay, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning for some participants wherever you are around the world. Welcome to this webinar. We're going to get going just shortly. People are now starting to come in. So welcome. My name is Dan Summers. I'm the CEO of Dexter, which is a software spin out from the University of Birmingham in real world data and real world evidence. And I'm delighted to present to you the agenda today, feasibility studies using real world data. And we're going to hear from three eminent practitioners of this field. We have Caroline Etev, who's the real world data evidence director at Cegedim. We have Constantino De Palma, who's a real world evidence consultant, data scientist, also at Cegedim. And then we're going to hear from Professor Krish Nirantharakuma, who's a professor at the University of Birmingham and in the applied health area. And we will allow lots of time for Q&A. We're going to try and keep to a tight schedule. And we want this to be interactive. So for those of you who are not familiar with Teams, where have you been? But if you do go to the Q&A button at the top somewhere, hopefully, you can ask all of your questions. If there's any that are really pertinent, I may just cough and we can go to the presenters. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll store them up and we will go through them at the end. But please do keep them flooding in real time. Right, we're just going to start off with a quick poll, just very quickly. If everyone can see that, and it should also appear in the chat, do you know the difference between real world data and real world evidence? And there's either a yes or a no. And you can be completely honest, there is no traceability. This is a non-democratic, non-transparent system. So if you just see that, and okay, so we have 100%, we've gone down to 60%. Okay, so that's great. So there is a mix. And I would say that actually, although I would say it's not always clear. So I think that's a very good and honest. So thank you very much for that. Let's also have a second poll just quickly. And this one is tricky. I had to look this up. I can't claim I knew the answer to this one. How many people are captured by electronic health records globally? So if you think about the population of the world, if you want to do your sums in your head about developing world, developed world, etc., what do you think the answer is to this question? And by the way, we couldn't get an exact answer anyway, so we have to do some calculations and some estimates. Let's see what people think. 50% is the most popular. We've got 33%. Okay, very interesting polls. If everyone can see that changing. Anyone else want to have an opinion? We've probably got a few more people who can. Okay, so we've got 20 to 40% is the highest response, and that is actually what we found as well in the literature. So well done. But also, what an interesting. Firstly, it's a huge bracket, and secondly, it just kind of shows both the opportunity and the growth in this area. So I thought that was an interesting way to kick things off. Okay, thank you for that. So without further ado, Caroline, let me hand the floor to you.
Thank you, Dan. So we are going to speak first about RWD landscape. So I'd like to start with a quick reminder on real-world data. Real-world data encompasses a vast array of information collected from real-world settings, such as electronic health record, electronic medical records, claims, medical administrative databases, pharmacy dispensation, patient registries, social media, genomics databases, wearable devices, etc. All these data contain very rich and diverse information that allow to have a complete picture of the patient pathway, treatment patterns, disease management in real life. RWD is patient data collecting routinely for medical and/or administrative purpose. Then, once the data is collected, it's going through a process of data processing step where the data is de-identified, anonymized, encrypted, reformatted, structured, and harmonized, in order to be clean and to be usable to generate evidence. Oh, sorry, I went too far. RWE is the results use analysis with data via different approaches, from descriptive statistical models until very complex AI models and algorithms. To generate robust evidence, the data should meet 4 pillars. The data should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. This is very important to have a robust data. So where RWE can help? So RWE can help along the full product life cycle, from drug discovery, from clinical development, market access, and sales and marketing. It can be, for example, evaluation of a burden of disease and identification of unmet need, or it can be a clinical trial optimization or usage of a synthetic control arm to complete a clinical trial. Then in the market access phases, it can be epidemiological studies, population sizing, effectiveness and safety analysis. Then also patient pathway, HEOR studies, adherence analysis, etc. So the usage of real-world evidence is very, very large. So now we are going to see an example of real-world data with thin data. So thin, it means the Health Improvement Network. It's a primary care database. It's coming from voluntary GP participation. And GPs are recording medical information in their clinical software. The information is coded and structured, and then it's deployed into a common data model. And there is also a complementary mapping to OMOP. SIN has been launched in 1994. Now it's covering 7 countries in Europe, and the data is coming from 21 different types of software. And we have more than 30,000 physicians, GPs, and specialists. It's covering 72 million patients, and on average, patients have 6 to 10 years follow-up. And it's a widely used and robust data source. Today, we have more than 2,000 publications. SIN is present in different catalogs, in HAS, so it's a Health Authority in France catalog, in the AMA catalog, in the NICE and NHS catalogs, and it has been certified by EDEN with the OMOP certification. And here you can see all the partners, not all, but some partners that we are working with the data. I will hand over to Costantino.
All right, so hello everyone. We're gonna go briefly through some studies to demonstrate a bit better in a more practical way some common use cases or real-world data, provide some insights on the evidence that they can generate and their application. I'm gonna try to be unbiased. Clearly, if we're in this webinar, we're all a bit fans of real WD, but let's try to ponder a bit strength and weaknesses. So this first study here is a classic epidemiology study. It aims to estimate prevalences across different countries for several chronic disease. So nothing too crazy until here. So far, so good. Uh, what what changes a bit is like if we ask ourselves, can we do the same with traditional survey-based method? Then we would probably find that the answer is yes, but by complicating our life just a little bit. So there are actually several points here that are worth highlighting. The first one is standardization. Yes, in this field, it's a bit of a buzzword, but uh, what I mean here is mostly the standardization in the collection practices. So we have large data systematically collected in the same format that can provide uh, great evidence for continuous monitoring for population at risk, which cannot always be achieved with the same cost and time for with survey-based methods. And the second aspect here is harmonization and comparability of the data, because running a multi-country study where we need to merge different sources of and different rates of prevalences, it's not always that easy when it comes to classical survey-based estimation. What's the challenge here? Well, in this case, definitely we are dealing with a volume of data that we never had before. So most of our estimates of prevalences are usually coming from way smaller samples. So we really need to take some extra care and some extra measure to be sure that we avoid bias and overestimation of those rates. The second study that I would like to introduce to you, it's a classic comparative effectiveness study between two treatments. Not going to bother you much with what's going on in the methodology or in the study design in this case. Nothing too revolutionary. Those studies can definitely be performed with traditional data sources, that can be performed with registries by following the patient after the initiation of the treatment or over multiple points in time. This example is here mostly because it's been used in real life by French health authorities to modify the indication of one of the products. So uh, basically what could have been only possibly be done before via a trial, it's now achieved via evidence generated with real world data. What's the catch? Well, in the context of regulation, clearly, if we have the possibility of having dynamic evidence generated in a time and cost-effective manner, it's great. But it's not always that easy to get system-wide acceptance, and the road there is still too long. Also, because we don't really have a legal benchmark for those kind of studies. The last two examples are a bit more delving a bit more in depth with on the power of this kind of studies and this kind of data. So on the left, we have a study trying to understand factors that can predict Alzheimer. On the right, we have one that tried to assess the strength of the association between a lab test and dementia. The main difference here is that in the Alzheimer case, we are letting the data speak to us, and we are and tell us which factors are actually predicting the disease. Whereas in the second, we need to make this assumption ex ante. The message here is that this kind of data is great to uncover patterns and relationships that we would have not been able to see before. But overall, the idea is that inference, prediction, and correlation are big words that require big care. Big volumes and heterogeneity in these contents are often double-edged words. More data means more robustness, but also more noise, bias, and potential overfitting. High variance pushes us to get a new perspective on things usually, but it's harder to explain and usually lead to more complex models. So to sum it all up, we're just gonna have a quick recap of what we've seen so far. You can go to the next one, Caroline. So what we said so far, the main advantages: large volumes, more heterogeneity, great, more robustness, new patterns to be discovered. It's easier to infer population-wide dynamics. Probably yes, because our target population approaches the general one. We can assess patient-level responses, and go towards the field of precision medicine a bit more by leveraging the heterogeneity that we have in the data, we get more nuanced predictions. And finally, harmonization and standardization are great ingredients to advance open research and more widespread collaboration in the field. In terms of disadvantages or challenges, well, data quality, completeness, continuity, this can be daunting and very costly. Anonymization, data standardization can definitely lead to a loss of precision because the data is transformed in multiple steps. The fast-changing legal landscape, as we said before, we have no real benchmarking regulation, so it's hard to keep up with best practices and what authorities deem right or wrong in terms of the evidence that is generated. And the high dimensionality and heterogeneity results in huge costs, especially on the shoulder of the researchers. But likely that's where tools like Dexter comes into the picture. So I'm gonna let the real expert really introduce you the tool, but I'm just gonna go quickly through what this tool can do for company like us and how this has helped our team so far. It's a quick way to run feasibility study, which is great because in this context, feasibility study is really like a go, no go kind of decision. So it provides a great way to approach the first, usually most scary step in every study. It can help us refocus resources a bit better because we can just replicate studies with the same design across countries and uncover new differences, new patterns, and focus more of our actual time in anything that is related to the analysis and interpretation of those patterns and not just like data manipulation and extraction. And lastly, this is especially for all the fans of machine learning out there, this is a great tool to navigate the data with the dimensionalities that we never seen before. So sometimes we presented with a research question, it's hard to really tackle down what is determining what, and Dexter can really come in hand in this sense because it let us explore the data without incurring into high cost at the beginning. And this closes up my part.
Thanks, Costantino and Caroline, for that. Very interesting. So if you have questions, do please line them up in the Q&A. And if you have problems using the Q&A, you can put something in the chat, or you can reach out, whatever medium you can, we'll try and find you, but the Q&A is at the top. In the meantime, it's a nice segue from that to Krish. Hand over to you to tell us more.
Thank you. Everyone can hear me? I hope so. Thank you. So I'm Krish Narendra Kumar, Professor in Health Data Science and Public Health here at the University of Birmingham. So I'm the Director for Center for Health Data Science, University of Birmingham, and the Chief Scientific Advisor for Dexter software, which was developed here at University of Birmingham. So that's University of Birmingham for you, which has the tallest freestanding clock tower in the whole world. We call Old Joe. And this is the center we work. We innovate a number of different technologies. One such technology is Dexter for automated clinical epidemiology. So what is the problem we are trying to solve here? The data we get are in millions, and it's not 1, 2 million, but in 40, 50, 60 million patient records. And these data have billions and billions of data points. But on the other hand, they were not collected for the purpose of research, and therefore they have their own biases, missing entries, and so on. And when we handle such data, usually we will have a clinician, we will have an epidemiologist, statistician, data scientist, and a number of other people like software engineers to help us process this data, and can take a good 6 to 12 months to get a study done. And that is the problem Dexter aimed to solve, particularly knowledge engineer every possible study designs in epidemiology. Those who know pharmacoepidemiology, complex study designs like the new user or prevalent new user design can be executed in minutes as opposed to months using this amazing technology in partnership, of course, with people like Segedim who have data across the Europe. And what this means is no more the real world evidence generation is limited to a few people, but also frontline health professionals, clinicians can use Dexter to generate real world evidence. We call it democratizing health data research because it's everyone's business today to improve quality of care, to innovate. So we as a National Health Service can do amazingly well. And more importantly, it is transparent, it's reproducible, and it is data agnostic. It doesn't have to be primary care data. It can be secondary care data. It can be maternity hospital data. And how does it work? You will access it through a web app. The data itself will be in a secure environment. And then the magic part of it, the data extractor and analytics engines will do the work for you to build study designs and to pull out the data in an analysis ready format. And not only this, it also provides you with a code builder for you to develop your phenotypes. And the more importantly, if different organizations want to access the same data, they will have separate entities to access it. At the same time, if they want to keep their own data securely, separately, those are also possible. Even within each organization, for each project, if you want to separate people, that is also possible. Even within one project, if you want different people to have different levels of access, that is also possible. We call it multi-tenancy. So it's data agnostic. It knowledge engineers your study designs. We can even bring it to your environment as opposed to you bringing the data to us. And it is scalable and also now provides automated analytics. So when it comes to real world evidence, there are numerous examples because we have published over 150 publications, and I could safely say we are probably the top in terms of using a technology and publishing large scale peer reviewed publications. And this meant as an academic unit, we have been able to publish number of publications, but also bring in loads of funding in millions of pounds and plenty of doctoral students getting through our institution. But Dexter goes beyond real world evidence right into the hospitals to implement a learning health system, which means every hospital can, within their health system, use their data to create evidence. And how we do that, we deploy the Dexter within hospital setting, so data does not leave the hospital and thereby providing insights that can improve care, such as this example, looking at gestational diabetes and how often yearly they are being tested for diabetes as a follow-on screening. So Dexter Care is for quality improvement, valuation of healthcare interventions, surveillance, and also within your own trust if you want to recruit people for trials or real-world evidence. Now, Dexter has partnered with West Midlands Secure Data Environment, where every data set that comes into the Secure Data Environment in West Midlands gets ingressed into the Dexter software, so people can access data much more faster than they used to before. Dexter is also being used in clinical trials in different forms. This is the different steps in a clinical trial, and we have highlighted the places where Dexter can help you. Particularly, here are some examples. All of these are worth 6 to 8 million pounds worth of trials. For example, the second one, Radiant, is with our colleagues here, Sejadim. And in the case of diabetes, what Dexter did was they wanted to prescribe anticoagulants to low-risk atrial fibrillation patients to prevent stroke. And for this trial to occur, there were a number of steps we had to do. We had to find out how many people we can recruit over a 3-year period. Secondly, if we were to recruit over a 3-year period a certain number of people, how many outcomes can we expect in a 5-year period? This helps you to understand if this trial is feasible to do power calculation. It also helps you by looking at low-risk AF patients against those who don't have AF to see if they are actually at high risk of stroke, dementia, and other cardiovascular events. And this publication will very soon come in Nature Medicine, the simulation as well. So this is just trial planning, and once we plan the trial, now we have got funding to around 3 million pounds to actually do the trial in real world. So as I said, this is a trial with our colleagues here at Sejadim, where we are looking at gestational diabetes mellitus, the population being gestational diabetes, the intervention being a text message with animation to encourage them to get tested for diabetes on a yearly basis, and then the outcome, of course, do they get tested? But our future tools will also not only improve care, give you real-world evidence, assist you with trials, but also can be used as a clinical aid, decision aid. So this is a study we have been doing 3 million pounds worth in people with multiple long-term condition, where we are trying to predict what is the next likely health condition and how medications we prescribe influence if they go on to get new health condition or prevent getting new health condition. And this we are achieving through the power of Dexter, very advanced AI methods and good quality data. And at the end, you will be able to see, for example, if a particular person who has 4 health conditions like hypertension, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, comes in with depression, what happens if the choice of antidepressant you give? You can see this could be fluoxetine, duloxetine, metrazepam, trazodone, or sertraline. But depending on which medication you give, what happens to depression? What happens to the health conditions they already have? And what happens to the health condition they are predicted to have in the future? So this is an ongoing project, and we believe that will help us to create not something beyond real-world evidence at your fingertips for clinical decision making as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Krish. Amazing. Okay, we've got a few questions coming in. We're coming up to the bottom of the hour, but we will run over for 5 minutes. We did allow more time for this, but I think we'll get the pertinent questions and then we'll wrap up in about 5 minutes. Some good questions coming in. First question that I found interesting, can I complete comparative studies using different countries? Should we go to Caroline? Do you want to take that one?
Yes, sure. So yes, totally. You can perform studies comparing different countries. As seen as a common data model, you can easily apply exactly the same methodology across different countries, and it's comparable.
And you have done this before? This is something that you get asked for?
Exactly, we have done it several times, and we are used to do it. So it's yeah, it's absolutely no problem to do it.
Okay, very good. Do I need ethical approval to complete feasibility studies? Who wants to take that one? Costantino, do you want to take that one? Just
as far as we deal with anonymized data, that shouldn't be a problem. At Strategym, we usually have we have a board that can review study protocols, mostly to be sure that everything is in check, but also to open a bit the eyes to new methodology and new potential questions. So it's a board of experts that can help shape the research question a bit better. In terms of ethical approval, our data is the data is fully anonymized. There shouldn't be any specific need in Europe. In the UK, there might be some differences.
I'm just reflecting on what you said there, and also going to about the feasibility studies. We heard the different use cases that things can be used for. For feasibility studies, is ethical approval still required, or Chris, do you want? Or?
No. So feasibility study essentially looks at incidence rates, counts, and so on, and if it is feasible to do a study. So for that, you don't need ethical approval, but naturally, whatever the findings are not to be shared with publicly, but you can have it for your own purposes.
I see. So basically, the other studies that you all talked about, some of them take longer, but they're still very quick. The feasibility study can be done, can you give me an idea of the time
within
frame?
minutes with Dexter for some of the feasibility studies. Some obviously will need more time, but the simple ones like incidence rates, what's the number of patients on particular medications, and how many patients will go on to get a particular health condition, incidence rates, these sort of things can be done within minutes.
Okay, well, there'll be a lot of people interested on the call who might be raising their eyebrows there. So do get in touch if you would want to challenge and test that out. Here's an interesting one. As a researcher more familiar with randomized controlled trials than real-world evidence, what are the advantages of RWE compared to traditional RCTs, and how can I effectively use data from Dexter and Strategym for my project? Who wants to take that one?
Very happy to, and then of course also get the views of Caroline and Constantino. Essentially, real-world evidence and the studies essentially complement randomized controlled trial. They don't replace. So randomized controlled trials will always remain the gold standard, but not always you can do randomized controlled trials. And these are simple examples for are where you might have done a randomized controlled trial in a particular population who may not be similar to the real world population. So you want to know these particular population, people like older people, people who have multiple long-term conditions, if these medications do work in those subgroups. And you don't get enough numbers to assess that in randomized controlled trials. Secondly, if you want to repurpose any medications, then doing a real-world evidence study will give you the results you can obtain if you were to conduct a trial, and that should give you a confidence if to go forward with a trial as such. So generating hypotheses and so on, real-world evidence will be very helpful. And also not to forget rarer health conditions. Sometimes it's quite difficult to conduct trials because of numbers, and therefore sometimes you need to pool data across a number of countries of treatments that are offered, and that can be also quite helpful.
Thank you. Caroline, do you have?
Yes, also to complete, also real-world data can help to fine-tune to the population, the target population for the clinical trial. So in real-world evidence, you can have predictive model to assess patients who will be more eligible to or more receptive to a particular treatment. And then you can analyze these characteristics and fine-tune your eligible population for clinical trials. So this is also a complementary usage of real-world data.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. I think we will bring things to a close just now. There are more questions coming in. I think it's been a fascinating dive into this topic, and thank you for all your questions and participation. If you want to follow up, we want us to follow up with anything you've heard or challenge anything that you've heard or explore it further, then of course you can. We'd be delighted with that. So please do get in touch. Do be bold and continue your own RWE journey. And we look forward to catching up with you at some future juncture. But to Caroline, Krish, and Constantino, and all of you, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.